Hello and good morning, Denver. Welcome to this community conversation on Denver's economic recovery. I'm Larry Schooler. As hard as this pandemic has been on all of us, we are beginning to see some light at the end of the tunnel. And now's the time where we want to turn the focus on you and find out the best way for the city and county of Denver to bring much needed funding, much needed relief to this community. So the focus of today will be your input, your suggestions, and here to listen are both Mayor Michael Hancock and a number of city directors who have joined us today to share a little bit more about the kinds of things for which funding is available through the American Rescue Plan Act, and hear your feedback and take your questions as to how the process will unfold from here. Well, just as we complete these demographic slides, I want to say hello again for the second time in as many months to Mayor Michael B. Hancock. Good morning.
Good morning to you. How are you, Larry?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Mayor. Tell us a little bit about what got us here today and what makes this conversation so important to you.
Well, first of all, as you know, we've had such a major hit from the pandemic. And as we face this economic recovery, our plan is to build forward and build back better to sustain the recovery. And our hope is to do it equitably so it benefits more residents, especially those who have been hardest hit by this pandemic. And so while we look at this opportunity, we are proposing to invest as much as $700 million into our cities and our communities' recovery. And this is we want to recognize it as a once in a lifetime opportunity to make some real impact on some equity issues that were laid bare during the pandemic. And we all agree that this is an opportunity to be more equitable. So through our economic recovery, we want to help create thousands of good paying jobs, provide relief for those businesses and workers and communities that have been, hit hardest by the pandemic, and create an economy that works for everyone.
And to that extent, I mean, I know you're involved nationally in a number of municipal organizations. What do you see looking at Denver as the greatest challenge compared to, say, other cities?
Very good question. You know, we recognize that this pandemic disproportionately impacted certain industries like our restaurant and hospitality workers, our tourism and construction industries that are major employers of people of color, and particularly women, who already face higher unemployment rates and lower job opportunities, and certain communities like our communities of color. And because of that, those most impacted and our historically marginalized communities are our top priorities in this recovery. So like every other city across the country, we came together to keep each other safe and healthy during this pandemic. Recovery means we all recover. Now, our residents on here today and attending one of the upcoming ones in terms of these telephone town halls are giving us their feedback online on how we prioritize is what's going to help us or help our recovery become a reality, and a recovery that is more equitable become reality as well.
What made you want to decide that there are going to be 4 of these programs? We're delighted to host with you. What made you decide to go this route to engage the community?
Well, we've done a lot of these over the years, and what has formula that's worked really well for us, Larry, is the engagement of our community, our residents who live here, who work here, who play here. They care about the city. They're passionate about the city. And when we have these type of opportunities in front of us, their feedback is awesome for us. And so it's very important that we reach out to them. They help us to think outside the box sometimes, really challenges. But more importantly, they make sure that we just don't have a tunnel thought process, a chance to hear, to validate, but also to reach a little bit if we had not really challenged ourselves to think more creatively and innovatively, and maybe even more inclusively. And these are really the objectives we have in this approach that we're taking.
Well, before I get to some of the members of the community, my most important question to you is, will the Colorado Avalanche win the Stanley Cup?
Without question. It will be something very powerful to have to blow in these finals for the Avalanche to be knocked off this opportunity, this journey that they're on. So let's get ready to hoist the Stanley Cup.
Go Avs, go Avs. Well,
go Avs.
We're glad to have you with us. And I want to pivot just for a moment to Chief Financial Officer Brendan Hanlon, who joined me as well last fall. And Brendan, great to see you again.
Good to see you, Larry. Thanks for having us.
Tell us a little bit about what these recovery dollars are. There's a lot of conversation, I think, in the media, and it may be hard for people to keep track.
Yeah, there's a lot of great opportunities that we're looking at. We're looking at leveraging both federal, state, and local funds to support our recovery. Specifically, about a week ago, we announced we will be receiving $308 million from the federal government from the American Rescue Plan. We're also initiating our own general obligation bond for $400 million, and that's a local contribution to our recovery that voters would be weighing in on here in November. We have to go through some process and refer some measures onto the ballot for this November, but voters would have the opportunity to weigh in on a GO bond. And what we're going to do is really pair these different sources together to create a multi-tiered financial plan for our recovery.
We're going to put a slide up here in just a moment on the screen just to be able to kind of explain why the city might be doing a local stimulus alongside the federal. Maybe you can kind of talk us through this a little bit.
Sure. And this goes into even more than I was just discussing. We have coronavirus relief funds that we received in 2020. Those are available to us through the end of 2021. The state of Colorado just announced their recovery plan this last week. We think we're going to be able to leverage those funds as well as a recipient. I mentioned the American Rescue Plan funds at $308 million. We still have our Elevate Denver bond program, as well as a number of other capital projects. So think National Western Center facility, Colorado Convention Center, so other capital investments. And then, as I mentioned, a 2021 and general obligation bond. So we're trying to pair all of these different resources together to support our recovery, not just in 2021, not just in 2022, but through 2031. I think we've all learned having the longest possible runway and supporting our economy over a long time horizon will make sure that we have a recovery that's accessible to everyone.
And just to underscore the point, today and for these other 4 events and then also online, you're wanting the community not just to give you input on potentially how to spend bond dollars, but also how to spend some of these federal dollars. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. And we're going to use this feedback to inform our investments of stimulus dollars around our business recovery and our community's recovery, as well as there's an option for infrastructure in those funds, but also the GO bond. So what we were trying to do is make sure that we weren't having multiple sessions. We're trying to bring you all to one session where you give us all of the input that you have around a multitude of different recovery strategies, all in one location, and then we'll leverage that through all of these different types of funds.
It's not every day we have this amount of funding to talk about all at once. And while we wouldn't wish on anyone the circumstances that got us to this point, it's a very unique opportunity for the community to work with the mayor and his team to figure out the best way to spend these dollars. Brendan, I'll come back to you in just a minute, but I want to give our audience another question. And we're shortly going to be taking some calls live on the air after we speak with one of our other panelists. So we'll go to, I think, the next slide. We want to ask you about community recovery and specifically ways to spend dollars on community support. So the question that we want to ask, it'll come up on the screen here in just a moment, is when it comes to community support, what is most important to you? When it comes to community support, what would you most like the city to invest in? And we should acknowledge that all of the items up on the screen and in this question are extremely important. We're just trying to get a sense of the highest and greatest need at the moment. So if you believe childcare would be most important, you're going to choose A, food access, you'll be texting B, housing and support for people experiencing homelessness would be C, mental health care would be D, and transportation access would be E. We'll give you a little bit more information on all of these choices here in just a minute. We're going to go to the slide that shows you the choices so that you can vote by text or online. So you'll see the choices up on the screen and you can text to 22333, one of the letter choices. If you've already opted into the poll by texting KW poll 1 to 22333, then you'll just text the letter of your choice. So A for childcare, B for food access, C for housing and support for people experiencing homelessness, D for mental health care, or E for transportation access. And as we get responses to this question, joining us now is the Executive Director of Denver Human Services, Don Mares. Don, nice to see you.
Well, good morning, Larry, and good job on the Spanish, by the way.
Oh, muchas gracias. Wanted to kind of get you to sort of share a little bit more with our community about what all these choices entail. I think some of them are a little bit more intuitive than others. What can you tell us?
Yeah. Well, before I go into that, let me just say what Mayor Hancock said is so powerful, that hearing from community is the top priority of this effort, and that's really significant. So I hope people really kind of embrace what we're trying to do here. The pandemic has really made us see our communities so differently. We have seen that people are impacted by this in different ways, depending on your ethnicity, your race, where you live. And that has come through loud and clear. And it's also clear that these particular issues that you see on the screen here are areas where folks have deep need that we've seen. You know, Denver Human Services serves 1 in every 3 Denverites. So we've seen a need in communities. So as we're working through this process to try to hear what people want us to focus on, it's really important for folks to give us their thoughts, because as you said, you know, there's a lot of need and we're trying to just focus where it is there's the greatest need. And since we know there's been disparate impacts, we're really focused on ensuring there's an equitable effort around how we support community.
Interesting. As I look at this list, just from my own personal perspective, I would have to choose F, all of the above to some extent. I mean, there's just an extraordinary number of different challenges that have come our way. I bet a lot of our listeners feel that way too. Any sense from you in terms of what you see from your position as to where there's been most pressing requests so far, or anything else you've heard in your conversations with the community?
I'll tell you, the one area that has just really surprised me tremendously is food access. It is amazing how many people in this community have needed help around food. And it's not just, you know, those who are at below a certain poverty level. It's been deeper into our community than I ever imagined. So that's probably the one that really sticks out. The one that is really important on this list, I would say, is the childcare piece, because that has a ripple effect to getting people back to work. Especially, there's a lot, you know, we've had a disparate impact on women in the workforce. So childcare is another one of those areas that there's a deep need around.
If you're just joining us, this is a community conversation about Denver's economic recovery. I'm Larry Schooler, joined by the Executive Director of Denver Human Services, Don Mares, along with Mayor Michael Hancock, and a panel of other experts from the city and county of Denver. We are looking forward to your calls. If you're listening to me already on the phone, you can press 0 screener and we'll be taking your call live over the air. If we could also maybe go back one slide real quickly, just to show the public the different ways they can join us. There are toll-free numbers in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Amharic, and there is a way for you to text your responses as well. But we do have a caller that I want to go to while we have Don on the line, and I hope I pronounced the name right. This should be Nagisti. Nagisti, you're on the air.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air. Go ahead.
This is Nagisti. I'm concerned about the homeless. I work at Rose Medical Center. There come in many homeless. I was crying to see them, especially the veterans. You know, they went, save the country. Sometimes they go in the chapel to sleep, don't have no place to go, you know. Maybe we collecting money to make a building, for them to live, a house. I don't know, I was sad about them, because I work at Rose Medical in the hospital, and then we have to help them. They need help, They live in the street, it's not safe, I'm worried about them.
I want to thank you so much, not just for calling Nagisti, but also for the level of compassion that you have for those who are probably the least fortunate. And I appreciate your call. Don, I'm sure you've heard comments like Nagisti's from across the community. Is there more you can share about the specifics of what Denver Human Services is doing on the homelessness front?
Well, the important thing to note is that it's an entire city effort that's trying to address this issue. And folks may not know or may not recall that the mayor created a whole new department, housing stability department, to really be focused on how we can address this challenge, because housing is such an important component around folks who are unhoused on the street. We care deeply about those folks who are unhoused, and we also care about public health. That's obviously got to be a factor in the conversation. So, we all have been really approaching folks on the street with the services we can all offer, trying to get them to have the services they need, and really are focused on trying to make sure that they know there are things available to help them, and there are shelters to help them. And so we're attacking this as a city in its entirety.
We are going to take another call from the community. And again, if you're just joining us, you can see up on the screen the different ways you can call into our conversation, but you can also text us with the information provided below. And if you're listening on the phone right now and would like to comment on this or the other aspects of relief, you can press 0. You'll speak to a screener, and then we'll get you on the air here shortly. But I want to go to Judy Phillips, I believe, who had a question related to childcare. So we're going to take Judy here in just a moment as our next caller. So Judy will be with us in just one moment. We'll get right to Judy. Okay, Judy should be there. Judy, if you're there, please go ahead. You're on the air.
I'm just wondering why it isn't possible for some of the empty business space where workers are working remotely. Why can't some of this space be converted to childcare and some of the employees be given free time to help with the staffing of childcare? Couldn't grants be set up or some incentive to help businesses use the space this way?
Larry, happy to provide a little response to that. What a great suggestion. And in fact, the state, which runs several childcare initiatives, one of them is the childcare program that we run, is really, I think, thinking out of the box around how they can provide better childcare statewide, because it's a challenging issue in all communities. And I know that they're looking at how to be creative around building codes and other kind of rules that they are in charge of, that they might be able to change to allow for more flexibility and creativity. But I appreciate your suggestion, and we'll definitely take note and work on that kind of piece.
Well, Don, I'm going to move to our next topic for now, but I'm sure we'll be back to you here before our broadcast is over. Don, thanks very much, not just for being here, but for all your hard work. We are going to pivot to a section specifically. As a matter of fact, I'm going to come back to Don here in just a minute, because we want to go to a slide and a question that relates specifically to housing solutions, and then we're going to touch upon some of the other specific subcategories. So if we could go to slide 15, I believe we'll have a question here specific to housing. Which housing solution would be most helpful to you and your family? Which housing solution would be most helpful to you and your family? So we'll go ahead and get that question going on the phone as well. And we'll put the choices up here on the screen, if we could, the texting and online solutions. So if you would say that the most helpful thing would be a wider variety of housing options in the neighborhood, you're going to want to text A. If it's eviction prevention, you'd press B. Increased affordable housing would be C. Mortgage assistance would be D, or ongoing rental assistance would be E. So if it's a wider variety of housing options in the neighborhood, A. Eviction prevention, B. Increased affordable housing, C. Mortgage assistance, D, and ongoing rental assistance is E. Don, as these responses come in, forgive me for saying goodbye a little prematurely there. Tell us a little bit more about this question, if you could.
Sure, happy to do so, Larry. One important dynamic around the housing piece that people need to keep in mind is that the city, through our department and through HOST, the Housing Accessibility Department, has pretty robust rental assistance programs, mortgage assistance programs, property tax credit programs that really do a lot to keep people from being unhoused or keep them in their house. That's really a really proactive, preventative measure, if you will. Then on top of that, we have city agencies and city initiatives that I'm sure Brendan and others can talk about in more detail, but that are looking at how to build more affordable housing, how we ensure that there's enough stock around that we can have folks have options. And it is challenging, there's no question about it, but there's no question that the city recognizes that and is really focused on that as an issue and trying to be very creative in that space as well.
And one thing I neglected to mention in making lots of investments specifically in sheltering over the past year, which I know is not an easy thing for a city government to shoulder, but clearly a priority for the city and county of Denver. I want to go to a member of our community here that has a comment related to property taxes. So we've got Ramiro on the line. Ramiro, if you can hear me, please go ahead. You're on the air.
Hello, this is Romero.
Please go ahead, sir.
Yes, I'm concerned about property taxes. I'm 81 years old and living on Social Security, very tight budget, and yet my property taxes keep going up. I think that for people that are retired and on Social Security limited incomes, I think some kind of a tax break should be available for us so that we can stay in our homes and not worried about being put out eventually or losing our homes.
Well, let me.
That's my comment.
Thanks, Ramiro.
Go ahead, Ramiro.
No, we're set. Go ahead, Don.
Oh, okay. So the city has funds that provide some property tax relief to folks who meet certain income thresholds and families. So I would encourage you to look at denvergov.org/human services and look for property tax relief to see if you qualify, because there's money available to help to some degree with folks with the property taxes. And I'll turn it over to Brendan, who also has some thoughts.
Larry, if it's okay to just jump in real quick, Don is absolutely right. The city does have a program. We also have a one-pager that lists out a variety of both local and state programs. And I know we have a number of staff who are helping staff this very presentation. I wonder if we could get something like that posted, whether it's in the chat or somewhere online, so that way you all who are watching have access to the whole host of programs that are available both here in the city as well as by way of the state. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Brendan, and to both of you for that information. And we will try to get that, if not posted here, then hopefully on risetogetherdenver.org. Again, that's risetogetherdenver.org for information that supplements everything you're hearing today. Also, if you'd like to dive into some of these questions we're asking live more deeply, there is a way to take these questions online at risetogetherdenver.org. And we highly encourage you to jump on and take this questionnaire while there. Well, we have a caller who I believe pronounces her name Melanie. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced it, but I know she wants to talk about women and the sort of work-life balance. So caller, if you're there, please go ahead. Melanie, are you there? Meliaha, perhaps? Okay, well, we're not sure if our caller is there. We'll have to circle back and see, but I know she had questions that might relate to the childcare conversation that we were having here just a little bit ago. Again, if you are wanting to join us, and if we could just briefly go back to the slide that's got our phone numbers and dial-in information, 888-400-1932, 888-400-1932, and we have this program being simulcast in Spanish, Vietnamese, and Amharic. While we're waiting to see if we can get the previous caller back, just want to let folks know, especially Ramiro, that you can call 311 or 211 that can also direct you to lots of resources related to the concerns that you had. Well, while we wait to see if we can get that caller back, let's go to an additional question that relates to food access, which was the thing Don and I were just talking about there a minute ago. This question is, which solutions would be most helpful to you and your family to access nutritious food? So we'll be posing this question to the callers as well as to folks watching us here online. Which solutions would be most helpful to you and your family to access nutritious food? And we'll put the choices now up on the text and web slide. So if it comes to more farmers markets or community gardens close by, we would ask you to text A. More food delivery programs would be B. More food services meeting special dietary or cultural needs and preferences, C. And more places that accept the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, or food stamps, or women, infant, children, WIC. That would be D. So once more, which of these solutions would be most helpful to you and your family to access nutritious food? Would it be farmers markets and community gardens closer to the house? A. More food delivery programs? B. More food services that meet my special dietary or cultural needs and preferences? C. Or more places that accept SNAP, food stamps, or women, infant, children, SNAP and WIC? D. We'll have those choices up on screen here for a moment, and then we're also taking those comments over the phone. The farmers markets and community gardens is trending very much on the telephone in terms of our respondents, but we also have responses coming in. Let me see if I can double back to Malia, who should be joining us again with some questions related to community services. So we're going to see if we can take Malia back on the line here in just a moment. And again, if you are watching on screen, you can continue to text and post online. Malia, if you're there, you're on the air. Please go ahead.
Yes, good morning, Larry. My name is Malia Glapion-Presley. And specifically, I have a question to both the mayor and the executive director of Denver Human Services, Don Marez. Don Marez, you mentioned concerns of women of color being disproportionately impacted. My question is, what are your concerns on women of color being wrongfully targeted and or terminated, and specifically there at Denver Human Services having an all-white leadership for child welfare?
Well, thanks for the question, Malia. I obviously can't talk about individual cases, but I can tell you that in the last year, we have diversified our executive team with African-American, a couple of African-American leaders, as well as some other diversity. So things are going well at Denver Human Services, and we're pleased with how diverse our leadership and our department are.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we obviously are living in a constantly changing world, and one in which social and racial justice have probably, in this generation at least, never been more top of mind, and matters of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're coming off of the 1-year anniversary of the killing of George Floyd just yesterday, and I know that that's brought these issues even more to the forefront. But thanks to Malia for her call. Let me see if I can go to Mark next, who had an interesting question that kind of relates to community-related issues. Mark, if you're there, please go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, why won't they open the rec center, the gyms for playing basketball at the rec centers? I don't know. They're saying it's because of COVID, but the majority of people have already been vaccinated or have had it. And it seems like a choice that people should make on their own to go play basketball together in a gym, rather than having the government just restrict everybody from playing. It almost seems like people just don't want to do their job and open the gyms up.
I might ask Brendan or somebody else to address that. I'm not sure when they're planning to open.
Yeah, no. Go ahead, Brendan.
Brendan Hanlon, the city's chief financial officer. I do not work in Parks and Rec, but I was on a call last night with Scott Gilmore, who's the deputy director of Parks and Recreation, and they were talking about the reopening program. So those rec facilities are beginning to be reopened. So I think now that we have far more assurance around the safety and the protocols inside of our facilities, those facilities are being reactivated. So I think we're on the right trajectory there. Thanks for the question.
It's so interesting to hear that call as the father of 2 boys who scavenged for a while to find an open basketball court. It's funny how the things that we take for granted pre-pandemic become so precious to us. It could be a rickety, rusty hoop, and the kids would be very excited about it. So also I'm getting some information from staff on some open rec centers as we speak. So that's really helpful. Carla Madison Rec Center, Eisenhower Recreation Center, and Green Valley Ranch Recreation Center. So for Mark, if he's listening, and for the rest of our community, there are rec centers that appear to be open that are able to accommodate Mark and others who'd like to join us. Let's go one slide back just to put our phone numbers up on the screen, and we're going to take another caller here in just a moment on the topic of community services. Again, you can see on the screen the phone numbers in all 4 languages: English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Amharic. English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Amharic. If you call us, you press 0 to speak to a screener, and then we'll get you on the air as quickly as we can at the time of the conversation. And also texting is continued to be welcomed. Why don't we go back to the text slide while we take our next caller? This should be Malia Howard joining us to talk about some housing. Malia, if you're there, please go ahead. You're on the air.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I don't know if you want to call this a question or a suggestion, but in regard to housing, I think maybe or asking what kind of help there is out there, and maybe one that can be created because of this pandemic, a lot of people have been, as you know, have lost their housing because they weren't able to pay rent or whatever reason. And now that they're trying to recover and go back to rent a place, they can't get a place because of their record that they were either evicted or, they had to break the lease because they couldn't afford to pay the rent anymore. What is there out there to help people like this? Because I know of a situation right now. My brother and his wife, they're both, they just turned 65, both of them. And because of that on their record, they lost their housing. And because of this being on their record, they're married, but they're actually having to split up. And my brother's living with my younger brother, and my sister-in-law's living with her son because they can't get a place because of this being on their record. So for them to be able to get a place, they have to pay this off to get it off their record. So I think that this is probably not an isolated incident.
Well, before Don answers, I just want to appreciate you, Malia, for sharing so candidly and vulnerably about something that's, I'm sure, very difficult to talk about and think about. And I'll let Don respond, and then we're going to move on to our next caller. But go ahead, Don.
Indeed, Larry. Thank you for sharing that story. Number one, I'm sorry to hear that there's some landlords who are not being as sympathetic to the plight of people who've been through this pandemic as they could be. But I would say go online and call our department or host, because occasionally when we get involved in a case of, we have first month rent programs and eviction assistance programs, sometimes we can help in making calls, and we'll do our best to try to see if we could be a little bit of an assistant in that kind of situation. But hopefully those programs that allowed people to not have to pay rent for a while would help more people and kept them from getting in that situation. But I think you're right. There's probably some consequences we need to hear about and try to think of how to help solve.
Thanks for that, Don. In just a moment, I'm going to be shifting over to talking about business recovery with Eric Caraga, the Director of Denver Economic Development and Opportunity. But before we do that, I wanted to take at least one more caller, Saray, who had a question related to food access and food security. Saray, please go ahead. You're on the air.
Good morning. My name is Sarai Alvarado, and I was calling because I was told that this month, May, would be the last month that they give the extra food stamps, SNAP. And I was just wondering if that is correct. And also, is it going to continue or not? I am visually impaired, and I'm disabled. So, that helps me out a lot. So I just wanted to know, what's going to happen with that? Is it going to continue, or are they going to stop it?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure when the end date of that program is, but it has helped so many people, this extra food stamp program. But know that to the degree you have food needs, we have 99,000 people on food stamps right now, and it's just an astounding number. But that still is, there's 40% of the Denverites who still aren't even enrolled in food stamps and could get that benefit. So I would say call us up. You can call 1-800-944-4DHS and pick one of the numbers on the menu, and then we will get you the specific information about your case.
And I suspect that either 311 or 211 might also be able to route her where she needs to go. But could you say the toll free one more time, Don?
Yeah, it's 720-944-4DHS.
Thank you very much. I should have said the number, not the toll-free number, but these days we all have those plans and we can call any area code, so it's kind of crazy. Mayor Hancock, I know, is still with us. Mayor, any comments so far on what you've heard?
Yeah, Larry, thank you. First of all, we should commend Don for the courage he is showing to sit there and to be the man on the island to answer these questions. Tremendous leader of Denver Human Services. And I think what we're seeing here is the diversity of challenges that people are facing. Some were facing pre-pandemic, but certainly exacerbated during the pandemic. And I think one of the things I would want to leave the people with is that your city distributed tens of millions of dollars to help our neighbors experiencing homelessness in the city. We set up shelters for hundreds of people. We were taking care of as many as 750, 800 people a night. That was set up in a matter of a couple of weeks, which is absolutely unheard of as well as doing things such as exhausting funds that were set up for temporary rental and utility assistance in the city of Denver. We continue those things. And I think if people utilize the tools that Larry, you laid out, 311 or 211, and we share with those technicians who are on the phone your challenges, we'll get you directed in the right spot. There's still dollars available to assist people. We just had some $21 million come in from the federal government to help with rental assistance. And so we're going to continue to issue those dollars as long as they last. If people need assistance with their rents, I should say, we are there to help, and we have those funds available. So give us a call, but we're going to continue to work with food insecurity, all the other challenges that people are facing. We're not done. And one of the reasons why we're working to invest $700 million is so that we can create job opportunities for folks who are unemployed, underemployed in our city to become gainfully employed and hopefully self-sufficient as well. So thank you again, Larry. Great job.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much to both you and Don. We're going to be shifting over, as I said, to Eric Hiraga from the director. He is the executive director of Denver Economic Development and Opportunity. He's going to be joining me here in I won't say the hot seat, the seat here in just a moment. But in the meantime, we want to put a poll question up as we pivot from community recovery to business recovery. So for those of you listening by phone, we're about to share another poll question with you related to business recovery. And I know we have some callers related to that topic that we're going to get to shortly as well. But when it comes to Denver's economy, what is most important to you to support an equitable, sustainable recovery? So when it comes to our local economy, what do you think is most important to support an equitable and sustainable recovery? We'll go ahead and put the text and online choices up on the screen. If you think it should be efforts to help job seekers and workforce development, you would text or choose A. Local business support would be B. Community and neighborhood support would be C. Public infrastructure and investment would be D. And government regulations for Denver businesses would be E. And very happy to have Eric Hiraga with us today. Eric, good to see you.
Great. Thank you, Larry. And thank you to everyone who's tuning in today to join this conversation.
And before we take a community caller, I wonder if you can just maybe expand a little bit on some of the different options that we're seeing in this poll question.
Yeah, no, thank you. Obviously, with the trends that we're seeing right now, we do want to get people back to work. So it's interesting to see the workforce development and job seekers being high on the list, in addition to that local business support. Since the beginning of the pandemic, I think a lot of our resources has been towards grant programs, just helping small business and nonprofits to survive. And there's just a lot more work to do. And this $700 million package is a great opportunity for both of those.
I would imagine that you, like Don, have probably seen things that have surprised you over the course of this pandemic. Does anything stand out in terms of a need that you didn't anticipate, or you anticipated it, but you never expected it to be quite this voluminous?
Well, it was just the trajectory of being at 2.8% unemployment and going right to 13.4%. It was a rapid hit. I don't think we've ever seen in our history. And so really just activating that response and knowing that there were so many people in need.
And if you're just joining us, we're having a conversation this morning about Denver economic recovery from COVID-19, from the pandemic and the challenges that it has produced. I'm Larry Schooler, joined right now by Eric Hiraga, the executive director of Denver Economic Development and Opportunity. We had Mayor Hancock, Chief Financial Officer Brendan Hanlon, and a number of other panelists joining us. And we want to mostly hear from you. So if you're listening on the phone and you'd like to share your comments, please press 0. You'll speak to a screener and then we'll get you on the air. You can also text to 22333 as long as you've entered that introductory phrase, KW poll 1. That's KWPOLL1 as the arrow is indicating. And we do have that multiple choice question still up on the screen. Our callers, I believe, were, tilted a little bit more towards, by a narrow margin, towards job seeking and workforce development, with a hefty amount for all of the options. And I assume, Eric, that on government regulations for Denver businesses, that's meant to be relief or some kind of other way for the city to help with compliance from these Denver businesses. Is that right?
Yes, that's one of the key strategies. Really, when we look at our policies and regulations, we need to do everything we can to make things easier for businesses to do businesses in Denver and its residents as well. And it's our processes across all agencies. I think with the pandemic and needing to provide help, we've made really major strides in that fashion, but there is always more work we can be doing to become leaner and more efficient.
Got some callers that we want to take on the subjects that we're covering here. Some are directly aligned with the different topics covered in the poll question, and some are a little bit off the beaten path. But we want to start with Regina. Regina's been holding for quite some time. Thanks for your patience. You're on the air.
Good morning. My question, first off, thank you everyone for being here and allowing us to have a voice in this. But my question is specifically to commercial space rent relief. Some of us have a back rent balance, and we're also trying to recover and getting close to or getting flush with our current rent, lease agreements and the rents that we have to pay on a monthly basis. And I'm wondering if there's anything in the pipeline for rent relief for either directly to businesses to help specifically with back rent, or if there's some sort of tax, a benefit for the landlords that hold our leases to help us out with if we're recovering or we're trying to recover with some of these rent balances that we've accrued during the pandemic. A lot of the pandemic funds, like the PPP and other funds, only allow us to use a small percentage towards rent, so it's hard to kind of catch up with that. And also to think about recovery and hiring, it's just hard when you have this big amount hanging over us when we could be increasing the workforce in some ways, but we have this big balance sitting on our heads. I wonder if there's any kind of thought put into helping us in this area.
Thank you so much for the call, Regina.
As business owners.
Thanks for the call, Regina. Go ahead, Eric.
No, that is a very good question, and I sympathize with you, Regina. We are really seeing this need out there. We do have a product in the past called the Business Impact Opportunity Fund, and it is for the purpose of business displacement. And as we're putting these proposals together, we do see businesses at risk, whether it's their ability to pay commercial lease payments, increase in property tax. So that is definitely on deck as one of the recommendations and the suggestions that we're putting forward. These funds could be applied as a grant to qualifying small businesses. And so whether that is used to pay for lease, whether it's for facade improvement, safety, security, lighting needs, or really even to pay for relocation and dislocation expenses. We are looking really hard at that as one of our tactics.
And if you're just joining us, you can call in to speak at 888-400-1932. That's our English line, 888-400-1932. And in Spanish, I'll try one more time, 888-400-9342, 888-400-9342. We're going to do another poll question related to business recovery here in just a minute, kind of diving a little more deeply into one of the options that you had put up on the screen. This one related to employment, I believe, because there are a couple of callers who are wanting to talk more specifically about issues related to employment. So we'll get that question here up on the screen. This gives you a feel for kind of a snapshot of data associated with employment and unemployment. It looks as if we've begun to make some strides in reducing unemployment, but clearly it is widespread as a challenge in our community, Eric.
Yes, no, obviously this is a key issue for economic development. And really through this pandemic, we're looking to bring back approximately 25,000 jobs that were lost during this pandemic, but also create an additional 15,000 jobs by the end of 2022. An ambitious goal, but we also understand that barriers exist to people to re-enter that workforce. So we are looking to invest in sectors of growth and opportunity, whether it's manufacturing, distribution, information technology, advanced manufacturing, professional services, small, medium businesses, and entrepreneurship in order to strengthen the employment base. One of the tactics will be to really train, retrain, reskill, really develop skills for our residents so that they can achieve that advancement, and really with an emphasis on special populations and target neighborhoods. Really, it's going to require collaboration between public, nonprofit, and private sectors to prioritize and develop the services and programs needed for our workforce to gain access to resources in wage growth, housing, transportation, dependent care, food access, healthcare, access to technology and education. So we know we have a challenge ahead of us, but we really want to hear from the community on some ideas. And we have a lot of great current programs that we feel like we could really emphasize and put more resources towards to really help people get jobs, but really jobs with advancement and mobility opportunity.
We want to give the audience a chance to weigh in on what Eric is talking about. So we're going to give you a poll question, multiple choice, and then we'll take some calls. If you are specifically seeking employment, I think the city and county would like to know what are some of the barriers that are preventing you from returning to work. I was out last night with some friends and was hearing about that from one of my friends. We'll get the choices now up on the screen, but if you're seeking employment, what are some of the barriers that are preventing you from returning to work? If it's there aren't any opportunities in my field, or I'm looking for work outside my field of expertise, you choose A. If it's I don't want to return to my previous job because of the low pay, B. If it's I don't have childcare or elder care coverage, C. If it's I don't have reliable transportation, D. Or if it's a lack of technology or internet access to either explore opportunities or work remotely, E. So a lot of detail there. I'll go through those one more time. If you're seeking employment, what's keeping you from returning to work? You can't find a job in your field or trying to find work outside of it. You choose A. You don't want to return to your previous job because of the low pay. B. You don't have childcare or elder care coverage. C. You don't have reliable transportation. D. And you lack the technology or internet access to either find a job or to work remotely. E. And let's of course acknowledge, Eric, that more than one of these could be a challenge for folks who are trying to return to work. I think you're hoping just to hear what perhaps the most significant barrier would be for folks trying to get back to work.
Yes,
we are going to,
I think,
oh, sorry, go
yes,
ahead.
Yeah, no, I think through this pandemic, there are a lot of challenges, childcare being one of them, whether it's transportation. I understand RTD is at 60% of capacity on their routes. There's just kind of healthcare concerns with the pandemic going on. There are a number of barriers out there. And really, you know, as I see the questions here, we're challenged by really under that question, what products can we have? What services can we provide to really help people, whether it's changing careers and outside their field of expertise? And we have programs in construction careers, really training. We have a Tech P program, which takes people from perhaps retail jobs and restaurant jobs, trains them into technology jobs, and see mobility. In the past, we've seen people with $40,000 a year wages graduate through this program and receive $90,000 offers. So I think training is and reskilling is a key lever to pull.
Caller specifically wanting to talk about our employment system. Joseph has been standing by, and we're going to take Joseph here on the line here in just a moment. Joseph, you're on the air. Please go ahead. Joseph, are you there?
Yeah, hi.
Go ahead.
My question has to do with Colorado Department of Unemployment. My experience is that the system is hopelessly broken. You can't really talk to a person. You have to talk through remote agents. They can't answer any questions. You can never get through on the line. You go through teleprompt after phone prompt, all that kind of thing. Now they have a system. When you try to correct something, that's the problem. You can't speak to a person. Now they have a program called ID.
Before you go any further, I want to make sure that either Eric or Don are the best people to speak to this. It's definitely a state of Colorado system as compared to city and county of Denver, which is irrelevant to to you and to most of the public, but is relevant in terms of who can speak to it. So Eric or Don, is this something that you feel you can answer?
Yeah, no, and apologies if you can't get through to a real person at the state, but I assure you at the city, please contact our workforce development shop. I'm sure someone could put a link and a phone number so you could actually talk to somebody. So I think Larry's right. There's the state side and the city side, but our workforce development team really stands ready to speak to you and see how we can help you navigate not just through the state side, but provide city resources to connect you to employers.
So it sounds like there could be folks who could be sort of not advocates, I'm not sure the right word, but conduits, liaisons from the city, from your team through the difficult morass that that Joseph finds himself in. And I've just been given a number here, 720-337-WORK, WORK, 720-337-WORK, WORK, or workforce.development@denvergov.org. That's an email address. Again, workforce.development@denvergov.org. I'm also told of a daily hiring event, Tuesday to Friday, 11 to 11:30 a.m. that can be reached online at bit.ly, that's bit.ly/hiring now Denver. Once again, that's bit.ly/hiring now Denver, Tuesday to Friday, a daily hiring event from 11 to 11:30. And let me just take this opportunity to commend our city and county staff for as much of the quick responses that they've been able to make to the calls that we've had during the meeting we've had this morning. It's rare that we can get this quick of a turnaround. Let me go to one additional poll question, but I do have some callers that I want to take while we're getting responses to actually these next couple of poll questions related to business ownership. And while we're getting those polls up, job seeker resources are also available at denvergov.org/workforce. Again, denvergov.org/workforce. And you can also always visit risetogetherdenver.org for additional information. Curious for business owners, as you prepare to move toward opening at full capacity, what are your barriers to success that you're most concerned about? So if you're a business owner, what are you concerned about as you get ready to reopen at full capacity? We'll put those choices up on the screen, and we'll also invite our callers to respond to that as well. Is it employee and customer health and safety? That would be A. Household demands like a lack of child or elder care. B. The cost of rent, lease, and mortgage. C. A lack of customer demand. D. Or needing more employees. E. So for business owners or for others in an entrepreneurial kind of situation, what are you most concerned about as you prepare to move toward opening at full capacity? Is it employee and customer health and safety? A, household demands like child or elder care. B, cost of your rent, lease, or mortgage. C, lack of customer demand. D, or need more employees. E. I can tell you, Eric, having been out last evening, the lack of customer demand was not apparent where I was. There does appear to be a good deal of pent up customer demand, but I'm sure that it varies greatly from business to business.
Yes, no, I think you could see that resurgence just going out and just seeing traffic coming back. And, I know there are some challenges with the business owners actually now rehiring their staff, whether it's a restaurant or a retailer. So it's been interesting how fast things have changed, especially in the last 2 weeks.
We're going to get to some callers just in the interest of time. I know we've got one other section to cover as well. So let me go next to Jim Carden. Jim's on the line. Please go ahead. You're on the air.
Actually, what kinds of things yesterday? In fact, I had.
Jim, you're on the air. Do you have a question or comment? All right, we may have lost Jim, so we're going to go to Tony, who is on the line. Tony has some questions that are somewhat related to what we were just talking about, but may bridge us over to another part of the conversation. Tony, you're on the air.
Yes, my question is, how does the enterprise zone relate to real estate properties?
Yeah, so for the enterprise zone, really it gives you personal property tax relief as a business owner. So you can qualify for the equipment that you purchase for your business or for that property qualifies for a tax exemption. And maybe Brendan's better at talking about the taxes than I. In addition, there's training credits that you get. So as you hire individual employees within that enterprise zone, there's a tax credit benefit per employee that you create or bring on.
Thank you very much for your call, Tony. We're going to, in a moment, take a couple of other callers that are kind of in this similar vein. I'm going to go ahead and ask that we move to the last question in business so that we can make sure to get to infrastructure investments. The question we have is actually going to be I believe, a multiple choice. Oh, actually, this is an open response question. How can businesses best be supported in recovery spending? So in general, if there are things that you haven't heard talked about during our conversation so far, how best can businesses be supported in recovery spending? So if you're texting or using our online interface, you can just send your comment as a text message or on our website, pollev.com/KWPoll1. You can also go and directly type your comment and it'll come up here for us on the screen. I want to go ahead to, let's see, Sister Mary Nell. I hope I've gotten that correct. This is an interesting comment that deals more, I think, with the nonprofit sector than it does the business sector directly, but still, I know, relevant to Eric and his team. So we're going to go to Sister Mary here in just a moment. This might be my first call from that sector of our economy, so to speak. So we're just standing by to see if Sister Mary can get on the line with us. We'll see if we can get her pulled up here in just a moment. And for those who are listening, we are going to pivot to infrastructure investments here in just a moment in the remaining time that we have. So we'll be taking, I know there's some folks who have been waiting quite some time to speak on infrastructure investments, and Adam Phipps is here to help us with that. Okay, Sister Mary Nell, if you're there, please go ahead.
I'm calling with thanks to the city of Denver for arranging this opportunity to listen to Denver citizens in terms of what is needed to have Denver rise from the scourge of this pandemic that we are living through. I'm grateful for the input regarding nutrition, housing, employment, equal rights for all citizens. Another human need is that for beauty and truth that nourishes our minds, our hearts, our spirits. Specifically, there is a marvelous performing arts theater in Southwest Denver, which with the infusion of resources can be revitalized. It thrived from its opening day in 1963, but has been dormant in recent years. During the last few years of planning for the redevelopment of the Loretto Heights College campus, the community was unanimous in wanting the theater to be revived. And so that's why I'm calling to advocate that some of the resources from Rise Denver can be put to the performing arts in Southwest Denver, which has been a cultural desert, really. But with the revitalization of this theater, it can be a gem. Thank you
very much, Sister Mary, for calling, for staying on for so long, waiting to speak, and for your kind remarks there, noting that this is related to our capital improvement program. But Eric, is there anything you can share in response to the caller?
No, I think a key pillar to recovery is arts, culture, entertainment, venues, and the culture that it brings. I agree with you, Sister Mary. Within District 2 Southwest, Loretto Heights development provides tremendous opportunity. So I know that the administration has spoken about that project. There is a big list of priorities that we have, but it is definitely something that we're taking a look at, and your support is noted.
Going to go one more caller on business and then jump quickly to infrastructure. Stephen has joined us to ask a question related to business owners. Stephen, if you're there, please go ahead.
Hi, yes. I had my main question had to do with the property taxes that you said you had some relief for. But my main question is, why do we assess taxes on business owners' property anyway? If they're leasing space and they own property, within that leased space, it doesn't seem, it just seems a little bit overkill to assess taxation on the property that a business owner has purchased themselves and used to furnish their own business.
Yeah, I'll try to take a stab at that one. So in terms of the Business Impact Opportunity Fund that we are proposing and looking at, we see that an eligible use could be property tax in addition to retaining the business, paying for leases and other qualifications, facade, lighting, safety, and security. Going to the second part of the question, I assume that you're a leasee, or are you the owner of the property and the business owner? If I could ask that question.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we
okay.
Still
yeah, no, that's fine. So, I think a standard in the industry is that triple net terms on the lease, including the property tax calculation. But sorry to do this to you, Brendan, but do you have a take on?
He's not really sorry, Brendan, but
no, we get often questions about the property tax assessment process. It's important to note that while the city and county, and it really is a county function, the city administers that process. The process is defined by state statute. So we adhere to state statute guidelines in terms of making sure that we assess all properties in the same fashion. And our assessment department goes through a state audit each year to make sure that we have been treating property assessments consistent with state law. So we don't have a lot of flexibility around that process and having different methodologies in different jurisdictions. So yeah, it's not maybe a very satisfying part of this process, but I think Eric's right to focus on, well, how do we find solutions within the business recovery investments that we could possibly have to try to deal with the challenges that you're facing when it comes to property taxes?
Thanks to you both for that. And I regret that we have to move on and can't spend more time on this right now, but I'm sure that Eric, Brendan, and other city staff would be open for additional discussion on this. Eric Hiraga, thank you so much for all your time with me this morning.
Thank you.
As we get back to poll questions on infrastructure, and I know we have some callers holding for it, I want to welcome the acting city engineer for the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, Adam Phipps. Adam, welcome. Good to see you.
Thanks, Larry. Happy to be here and hear from the community today.
You bet. So we are going to put a poll question up on the screen as it relates to citywide infrastructure and find out what is most important to you. As we get this ready, I'm mindful that infrastructure has come to take on very much a different meaning, I think, as we've gone through this recovery, with a lot of things becoming labeled as infrastructure that we might not have thought of before, and including what Sister Mary was talking about a little earlier. So when it comes to citywide infrastructure, what is most important to you? And I'm going to put the text and online choices up here on the screen momentarily. If it's building safe and accessible streets, sidewalks, bike lanes, and transportation systems, you would text A. If it's expanding and enhancing the parks and recreation system, B. If it's supporting water conservation and environmental resiliency, C. If it's improving community and cultural buildings, like what we were just hearing about, D. Or if it's improving spaces to serve people experiencing homelessness and promote public health, E. So again, safe and accessible streets, transportation, A. Parks and recreation, B. Water conservation and environmental resiliency, C. Community and cultural buildings, D. And spaces to serve people experiencing homelessness and promoting public health would be E. And we're getting those questions, or rather those choices, conveyed to our callers as well. What can you tell us about the categories that we're seeing here as it relates to the city and county's work?
Yeah, certainly, Larry. And again, thank you for the opportunity here. And I think you said it well, right? The definition of infrastructure has expanded as of late. You know, traditionally, when we think of infrastructure, you think of roads and bridges, you think of sidewalks and bike lanes, but really it's all things that enable a community to function, whether it's public safety, you know, a fire station in your community so that the response times are as great as possible. It's a library to ensure that a community has a location with access to internet, a place to study and meet. Or our cultural institutions, you know, where we play, where we are entertained, and recognize that that type of investment is critical for a community to function. You know, we've had the opportunity to invest in infrastructure in the past. We've seen that in the Better Denver bond in 2007. We see that now in our Elevate Denver bond, and really having this opportunity through RISE to continue that investment is unprecedented in the city's history. And so really, you know, looking forward to hearing where that investment should be focused from a community standpoint.
And I'm going to go ahead and take a caller who really wins the Denver Patience Award. I think she's been holding for close to an hour patiently. But Wendy Larson is joining us with a comment related to infrastructure. Wendy, if you're there, thanks for holding. Please go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I was just interested in what everyone was saying. My question on infrastructure, I live in the Ma Lee area, and in the middle of 2 rows of houses, there are utility poles. My house is toward the end of the street, and I, in my yard, have a utility pole that's strung with probably 12 different lines. It looks like grandma's knitting sitting on a pole at the end of my garden. But to me, it looks dangerous. Are we ever going to have buried lines in the city?
Thanks for the question. And I liked your metaphor, your choice of metaphor there. Although my late grandmother, may she rest in peace, might have taken issue with it, but I understand your question. But Adam, what can you tell us?
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. And you did paint a very clear picture there, so appreciate that. The city, there's a lot of utilities that are required for a city to operate. The city manages a number of those utilities, but oftentimes regulates, the vast majority. And so where there are individual instances of concern about safety, I certainly would invite you to call 311. We'll get an inspector out there, immediately to take a look at that and address any critical or immediate need. But also want to address your general comment there of, is the city working towards undergrounding and ensuring that we have an infrastructure system that's sustainable, less susceptible to any type of adverse weather events, and dependable and reliable. I think that's one thing we've all learned throughout this pandemic, is that ensuring that we have dependable, reliable internet access to function from home is key. And the answer is yes. And the city has been working towards that for a number of years. But that's just another reason why an investment such as what we're seeing with RISE, whether those be dollars from the federal government, from the state government, or local city dollars, are important, because that allows us to further that investment and continue that movement in the right direction.
Brendan Hanlon had his hand up to add something.
So thanks. I think this is a kind of a unique opportunity to make sure that we mention other city partners. So our recovery is not just the city and county of Denver. It's partners like the Denver Housing Authority, RTD, Denver Health and Hospitals. We're going to need to make sure that we're reaching out to all of them, and we have plans to coordinate across multiple kind of local partners to make sure that our recovery is robust, and it isn't just a city responsibility or a state responsibility, but it is all of our local partners. And I think this is likely an area that requires some partnership with others who maybe leverage an asset like a utility pole. And I think Adam's right. If there's any unsafe conditions or concerns, being referred over to 311 is the right first step.
Thanks to you both. I'm going to go ahead and thanks for the call. I'm going to go ahead and get a couple of other questions asked, just because we are coming up on our time. What is the economic benefit that the city should prioritize as it relates to infrastructure investments? So if it's projects that offer the most jobs, A, projects that support Denver's tourism and hospitality industries, which the mayor told us have been particularly hard hit. B, projects that offer the most opportunities for small, minority, and women-owned businesses, C, and projects that improve access to technology like computers and the internet, D. So infrastructure can have a variety of economic benefits. What do you think that the city should prioritize? If it's projects that offer the most jobs, including apprenticeships and job training opportunities, you text A. Projects that support Denver's tourism and hospitality industries, B. Projects that offer the most opportunities for small, minority, and women-owned businesses, C. And projects that improve access to technology like computers and the internet, D. Gosh, infrastructure has a lot of benefits there, doesn't it? It's a lot of things that these infrastructure investments can do. I was just checking to see what our folks on the line said. The phone callers were favoring the jobs choice, but also the opportunities for small, minority, and women-owned businesses. So a wide array of comments to that. So we'll keep this poll up for just a short while longer and then get to our last question. And then I know we have a couple other callers we want to get to. Adam, I hope you don't feel short-shrifted as we move more efficiently through this segment. So again, what is the priority for economic benefits related to infrastructure investments? Those that provide the most jobs, A, those that support Denver's tourism and hospitality industries, B, those that offer the most opportunities for small, minority, and women-owned businesses, C, or projects that improve access to technology, D. All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to our final question on infrastructure, just in the interest of time. And this question relates to other kinds of priorities for infrastructure projects, because infrastructure can mean building new projects or fixing something that already exists. I think it's easy for us to think of the ribbon cutting or the groundbreaking, but there are other ways that we can fix up existing infrastructure. What do you think the city should prioritize? So if you think it's projects that build something new, you would select A, projects that improve something that already exists, B, or projects that fix something that is outdated, C. So again, infrastructure could mean building something new or fixing something that already exists. What should the city prioritize with this available funding? Projects that build something new, A, projects that improve something that already exists, B, or projects that fix something that is outdated, C. So on both this and the prior question, Adam, tell us a little bit more about your thinking here in terms of what you're looking for.
Well, there's no doubt that infrastructure is transformative, whether that be the creation of jobs, as we saw in the previous poll, dollars to small businesses so that we can grow our business network here, but also in maintaining our assets. Just some quick facts. The city and county of Denver maintains $8.6 billion in public assets. And through these community engagement events, both now and previously as it relates to Elevate Denver Bond, we heard ideas for another $4 billion. And so if you think about the infrastructure around us, it's important to balance just what you're seeing here. How do we add resources and assets to our community, but ensuring that we're being good stewards of those resources that we have today? So certainly I'm excited what I'm seeing on the screen. I know this is likely just a portion of the input, but it is important for us as a city to not only expand what we offer, but continue to invest in what exists today.
Well, as we get responses in from the to the last poll, I hope everybody can hear me okay. We're going to get our last couple of very, very patient callers on the line, starting with Mary Sanders. Mary had some questions related to support for persons with disabilities. Mary, thanks for holding. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me okay?
We sure can. Go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. So my question is pertaining to disability access within the community regarding housing supports as well as food access. What are we going to do regarding the funding to improve access to barriers for persons with disabilities who are needing housing, let's say increasing housing funds for people with disabilities to choose where they want to live, and also and get assistance. And then also, what are we going to do about food barriers? Because it's wonderful that we want to increase the supply of chains or local markets that take food stamps. But for people who don't drive, how are we going to increase the access to them being able to access food in a equitable way to their peers, or maybe not peers, but to everyone else in the community? Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. And to Mary and to all of the folks who have called in, I know we have one other caller after this, but just want to acknowledge that it takes courage to talk about personal circumstances and to share that openly with your neighbors. So I want to thank you for these thoughtful questions and for vulnerability. Don had his hand up, so I want to turn to Don Mares first, and then maybe Adam if he'd like to add on. Don.
Well, what a great question, and really an important area in the city that we do pay a lot of attention to. I want to let folks know that we have actually a mill levy dedicated to helping folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities that we operate called IDEAS. And it is a fund that we are actually using to address some of those very issues. We've surveyed the community of people impacted, and we put funds into some of those very areas, and housing was one that came very high on the list of need. So that's one area. And then we in our department have programs that help folks with disabilities. And again, if you would, you can call 211 and 311. I think that's easier than our long number. They can direct you to our department to either see what we offer, or we partner with folks out in the community, nonprofits that support folks with disabilities, and would be happy to see how we can connect folks to those resources.
And I know Eric at one point had raised his hand. I don't know if you wanted to add to this.
Sure. In terms of the food desert, that's something that we are aware of, are constantly looking at different parts of the city. An example of success is the relocation or a new location of Costco in the Northeast Denver. So that was recently announced 6 months ago. And really it takes the community working with the grocer or retail chain, working with the landowner and the developer to make that all come about. So our office is always available to hear any certain concerns, especially in terms of geography where you think it makes sense. So we stand ready to receive your input and listen and take a look at the opportunities in front of us.
The TV viewers can't see this, but I have the three amigos here. I've got all of our team standing by, ready to take questions. And gentlemen, we do have one more caller, but just in advance of that, thank you for your patience as we have gotten through so many interesting comments from the community. And Miranda is the last caller I have for today, and she's going to close us out with her comment. Miranda, you're on the air. Please go ahead.
My comment is about how mixed race people and the mixed race population. I don't know if you guys are aware, but Denver has one of the largest mixed race populations in the country. And we're often ignored, and lots of people like to pretend that we don't exist. So I was wondering, what plans in terms of equity going forward does our state have to make sure that mixed race people, and particularly mixed race children, aren't being left behind?
Yeah, fascinating question. I just want to acknowledge Miranda. She was, I think, one of the first people to get into our speaker queue, which means that she's co-recipient of the Denver Patients Award today. So thank you very much for that. Don, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I would say one area that really came out loud and clear in this last year, particularly after the George Floyd issue, was Mayor Hancock's really insistence that the city address equity and diversity issues head on. So he actually created a new office in his department that is focused on equity and diversity issues. And they are very broad in their thinking. I mean, we will take what you said and let's pass it on to that group. But they are very broad in their thinking, and they're being creative and very forward thinking about how they address these issues. But you know, that's an important point that we need to keep front of mind, is that when we talk about race and ethnicity, that it's a very diverse population. So thank you for raising that.
Absolutely. Adam Phipps, Eric Iraga, Don Mares, thank you, gentlemen, very much for all of your time and expertise today and for your service to the community. We appreciate it very much. Also want to thank Chief Financial Officer Brendan Hanlon for sticking with us throughout. He's a very busy man, as you might guess, but always has been available to the community to lend his expertise and support. So Brendan, thank you. And of course, to Mayor Michael Hancock, who joined us earlier, we thank the mayor as well. Want to let folks know that this conversation will continue in a number of different ways. Most importantly, we want to encourage you to visit www.risetogetherndenver.org. That's RISE together denver.org. You can share additional feedback and take surveys and be part of open forums at the website. So it's not just an information page, it's really another way for you to convey your input past our conversation. I will tell you also that we are going to be back with you on Thursday, June the 3rd at 6:30 in the evening. We've scheduled 4 sessions so as to accommodate the maximum number of community members. And so if you're hearing this, and you're certainly welcome to join us again on Thursday the 3rd at 6:30, but please tell your friends and neighbors that they'll have another opportunity to join us then. And the call-in and texting and online options will be there as well. I want to acknowledge and thank members of my team, including Zach Barr and Sarah Franklin, for their tremendous support. Allison Court and our call screening and polling team, want to thank them. Also acknowledge Poll Everywhere for the support on text messaging. I would be remiss if I did not thank Kiki Turner, who really is sort of the executive producer, I think, of this incredible effort. Did so much work to get us ready for success on this conversation, and has been just a tireless advocate for both her department, but also for the people of Denver. So Kiki, thank you very much to you. And I know there were a lot of other city and county staff who assisted us, so thank you all as well. So on behalf of all of them, I most importantly want to thank you all for joining us, for being part of this conversation, and for helping to make Denver the great place that it is to live, work, and play. Until we meet again, this is Larry Schooler saying thank you so much and have a great day.